because Kevin has lots to talk about. So our speaker is Kevin Paxman from IST Client Services, and he'd like if you could just hold your questions to the end. So Kevin's going to tell us all about Drupal development without coding.
Yes, thanks. Yes, I have a lot to get through, so I apologize if I talk a little fast. I'm trying desperately to get through something that tested out at about 50 minutes yesterday. So getting started with Drupal development without coding. So just a very quick background into what is Drupal. Drupal is the content management system that powers most of our university websites. And it's a very complicated system, but it's also a very powerful system. A good place to get started with it, well, you can do stuff through the GUI, the graphical user interface, without having to touch code at all, which can be a real benefit for getting started. Work done in the GUI can be exported and passed on to developers, themers, etc. if you need to enhance what you've done, or if it's just straightforward, it can go straight onto the site. It can indeed be unicorns and rainbows. So what are we going to do today? We're going to create animals content type for our zoology department, both of which are fake, so don't bust me if I get anything wrong about the animals. We're going to populate it with some sample content. We're going to create a listing page with some filters. And we're going to export the work so that it can be done, handed off to a developer, or maybe just placed on another site. So why do we use content types instead of just blobs of HTML? Lots of people who come from a old school web development background really just love blobs of HTML. They let you do whatever you want, but that's kind of a problem. It doesn't give you a task-based experience. It doesn't give you role-based experience. So we can, with content types, we can let different people have different access. We can tell people where exactly to go. If you need to create a contact, you go to the contact content type. You don't have to guess. It gives you consistency of experience on the site. So the phone number is always underneath the address, for example, instead of sometimes one spot, sometimes another, which you can get with blobs of HTML. The fact that it uses fields means that you can pick and choose those fields and present your data in a number of different ways, which is particularly handy for open data. You can feed it out and people can pick and choose, and they can build their own apps on top of your content. So I've got a lot to get through, so we're just going to burn right through it. Somewhere here I have a web browser. So this is our test site. I've already logged in. I'm sorry if I can't zoom it too much more, or things start going off screen in the authoring experience. If you're having trouble seeing, I recommend coming closer. Structure. The very first thing I'm going to do is add a taxonomy. This taxonomy is also known as vocabulary. And this one is going to be called class, except it's going to be spelled with a C in front. And that is our biological classification. And we always change the machine name so that it's identified as belonging to the university. And we'll also put in the word animals to identify that it belongs to our animals content type that we're creating. Now, every time I hit save, it's going to take a couple of seconds, and I'm going to vamp really poorly. Class. You think the very next thing you'd have to do is add terms, and you can just start right there. But then what we're actually going to do is configure URL alias patterns so that all the classes we add get a proper path. So I'm just going to close that taxonomy term. And the pattern is going to be, we're going to put everything about animals in an animals folder. We're going to put the classes in a class folder. And I'm going to move my mouse so you can see. And we're just going to use the term name as the URL. So now we're done. We'll go back and we'll create a handful of terms to our class. It's the very first one, and I won't try and pronounce them because I will get it wrong. These are actual terms according to Wikipedia, at least. All right, so now that we've created our terms, we're going to go in and create a content type to hold everything. So structured content types. I'm going to add a content type. We're going to call it animals. The description for animals is information about a specific animal which populates the animal's listing page. I'm going to try and not go back and fix typos. Now again, we always change the machine readable name. We always use UW for the university. As I said, CT means content type. It's a convention we have in the WCMS. I'm going to change the title field's label from the default of title to common name. I'm going to make publishing not default, and I'm going to make it use our revision system. We're going to turn off comments. We don't want people commenting on the animals. We want to turn off the menus because we're going to build a listing page, so we don't need menus for this. I'm going to put it in the XML sitemap so it shows up. And we're going to save and add some fields. So we could have just hit save, and that would have saved our work so far, and then we'd have to go and hit add fields. So save and add fields is theoretically a time saver. But as I say, I'm not. There we go. We're going to get rid of the body field because we don't need one for this particular content type. Drupal always creates a body field by default. And we're going to add a bunch of fields. The first one we're going to add is a fun fact field, which is going to be a long text field. We hit save. I didn't rename the machine name. Technically, we should always rename the machine names, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip over that for the fields. So we're going to make fun facts required. We're only going to make it 2 rows, and we're going to save. And then we're going to add a bunch of, we're going to add a Wikipedia article field. That's going to be a link. So this can be a good idea. If you know that people are just going to cut and paste from Wikipedia, don't let them. Make them put in the link to Wikipedia instead. Normally we'd also put help text in, but we're skipping over that in the interest of time as well. We're going to give this a static title so that it's always Wikipedia article. And we're going to save the settings. We're going to add another new field. This one's going to be called photo. You might be surprised to learn that the photo is an image. And we hit save. Now we're going to make this an optional field. They don't have to have a photo. So what we're going to do is add a default photo if they don't choose one, which I have prepared previously. So we're not going to make it required because that would make that pointless. We're going to set a minimum resolution of 100 by 100. For our demo, we're only going to ever use it at 100 by 100. So in general practice, you want your minimum resolution to be the highest size the picture will be so that it never has to scale up. It always has to scale down so you don't end up with jaggy pixelated pictures. We're going to enable the alt field and make it required because pictures need alt fields and they need to be filled in for accessibility. We're going to set up some file sources to match what we do in the WCMS. So we always have an MC, we always have remote URL, and we always have autocomplete reference. And we always say that the autocomplete contains and search fields, and we always say that the MC browser settings are full. We don't change any of the file attached settings. So next up, we're going to link up that taxonomy we created earlier. That's why we created that taxonomy first, because it is very difficult to link up something that doesn't actually exist. Just for confusion's sake, taxonomy here is referred to as term reference. And we're going to make it an autocomplete term widget so people can just enter their own tags if the ones that they want aren't in the list. Now on the next screen, it's going to make me pick my vocabulary. I'm going to pick that one I created. And I'm going to make this required. Next thing we're going to do is add a handful of fields that just collect some little pieces of information. So we're going to go for the names of the young. That's just going to be a text field. And we're going to hit save. This is why I timed out at very close to 45 minutes each. Hit the defaults. Names for young is required. Now, many animals have more than one possible name for their young, so we're just going to make this unlimited values. I'm going to create a handful more of very similar fields as you may have seen from the autocomplete. So we've got names for the female, which is also going to be a text field. We're going to save it. We're going to save it. There we go. We're going to make that required, and we're going to make that unlimited. Now we're going to add another field, names for the males. That's also going to be a text field. Now, obviously, this took a lot of pre-planning to get it so that I could theoretically do this in 45 minutes. You won't ever try and create a content type in this much of a hurry in real life, I hope. And unlimited again. And we're going to collect one more piece of this type of data. We're going to ask for the collective nouns, which is also going to be a text field. So very exciting part. Come on, sir. Part of the reason it takes this long at this point is because it's creating database tables for all of the fields as I go. So that's required, and it's unlimited. I'm going to save. All right, only 2 more fields to add. So we are going to move away from those text fields at least. We're going to find out whether or not these animals are on campus, and that's just going to be a simple Boolean, which is a yes/no. We're going to make it a on-off checkbox because it's going to be a yes/no. And again, because it's a yes/no, we're going to actually have to enter some values to be saved. And I think I heard a guess from the audience that it's going to be yes and no, and you're right. If you don't set yes or no, it's actually going to say 1 or 0, which is not very human readable. And we're not going to make that required, because if we made it required, then everything would have to be on campus. Get the right setup. The other thing we're going to do, see by default right now it says that it's yes. We're going to use the field label instead of the on value, so that instead of ticking a box that just says yes without any explanation, it's going to be a box that says on campus. The final field we're going to add is a location field, and we're going to cheat a little here with what we would normally do with a location, just to keep to the no coding part of the demonstration. So normally we have some code which brings in the university locations as a pre-filled drop-down box. We're not going to have that in this instance, because that would mean I would have to go into code. So instead we're going to cheat and just collect the name and the latitude and longitude and use that. There we go. So we're not going to collect the street locations. We're going to default to Canada, and we're going to allow the coordinate chooser. And we're going to make the marker be the university marker. 5. Location's not required because not everything has a location necessarily. So that's our content type created. At this point, you could theoretically start entering data. We're going to do a few more things before I show you a run through of that. I'm not sure I have to hit save a second time here, but it makes me feel a whole lot better to hit save a second time just to be sure. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to make that location field not show up unless they've ticked yes, because we don't want to collect a location if they're not on campus. So we're going to our manage dependencies here. And we're going to say if the location is based on the on campus, if the dependent field is visible when it has a value of on campus. All right, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a URL path is for our content type so that it goes in the right path. So that is under URL aliases. There we go. And we're going to go into the patterns. So this is the same screen we got to from the taxonomy. We're going to set it to the animals/node title, so it's just right in the root of animals. It's a really good idea if you're creating content to have everything be off the same path, again, for that consistency of experience. You don't want /animals/animals-listing, because that's kind of confusing. Okay. And the other thing we're going to do before we start creating content is set up some permissions. So right now, again, I could start creating content because I'm an administrator on the site, but no one else can because we haven't set that permission up. The permission page in Drupal is very complex, or complicated, I guess. And we make it worse by having a whole bunch of roles, so it takes up quite a bit of space and quite a bit of depth. I'm going to just cheat and go straight to the sections I know I need. There we go. So what we want to do, set up permissions for creating content. We're going to scroll over a bit. So this was animals. This is the big screen as to why I didn't want to zoom in very much. There's administrator. Okay. And where's the last one? Animals down there. All right. So we always make sure that the permissions are set up that administrators, site managers, and WCMS support can do basically anything. If you're at all curious as to what permissions make sense, it's a good idea to maybe model them after the ones that are on our web page content type. So we let content editors and authors edit things, edit own, and edit any. But we don't let the lower permissions delete or any content at all. There's some other permissions that we would normally set. In the interest of time, I'm going to sort of skim over them. And I'm just going to set them for the administrator. So overriding published options, we're just going to go through and... So again, normally we'd set this up so that it matched, for example, what web page has. And then the other thing we're going to scroll down to is that taxonomy. There we go. There's our class taxonomy. So again, normally we'd let people do more. Actually, we can let people do more because this one's short. So we let everybody add terms, but only the higher ups get to actually delete terms. And save. So now we really are fully set up with our content type. As soon as this page finishes saving, I'm going to create some content. Now, because I'm going to create content live, I've prepared a spreadsheet that I can cut and paste from. And any second, there we go. So there's our animals content type. So I'm going to create a goose. The fun fact about the goose is over here. The Wikipedia article link is over here. And I've got a remote URL for the image. I'm going to transfer it over. There we go. The alt text is a goose in a field. That's close enough. And the geese have a class which we've already pre-populated. There we go. Geese are goslings. Female is the goose. The male is the gander. And there are a whole bunch of collective nouns. So they could be a flock. They could be a gaggle. They can be a herd. They can be a skein, I'm going to hope is the pronunciation. They can be a team. And they can even be a wedge. Although if you look at Wikipedia, that's only if they're in the air. We're going to say, yes, we have geese on campus. We're going to say that they're in EV2, which is the home of our goose tracker. So, and I happen to have looked up the latitude and longitude. I'm sure you all have the building latitude and longitudes memorized. And we're going to publish this. So now that my cut and paste is done, oh, I didn't turn off the authorship information. That's the step I missed. So you can see here's our page. We've got a fun fact, we've got our Wikipedia article. This is the default look. We've got a location, but there's no fancy map here. We're going to change a bunch of this. I'm going to open in a new tab, so I can just come back to this and go into content types. And I'm going to go into our display options here. And we're going to do some things. So we're going to bring the photo right up to the top. We're going to lose its label. We're going to lose the label for the fun fact, the Wikipedia article, and the location. We're going to bring the label for the class inline. We're going to bring the label for on campus inline. We're going to change the image to be that 100 by 100, and we're going to actually link it in this case to the original file so that you can actually click through the image to see it at full size. We're going to turn off the linking of the class. Normally that would let you have a click through on the class so you can see everything that's tagged with that same term. We haven't set up that listing page really. It's not very exciting because there's only one. So I'm just going to turn that off. And we're going to change the location to be a map. And then when that saves, we're going to go back and hit refresh here. And you can see we've got everything exactly what it is, and there's our pretty little map. So now we're going to create the listing page. I'm going to close my extra tab. Views, and let's see if I can manage to get this one fully stepped through. So we're going to add a new view. The view name is going to be animals. Once again, we would normally change the machine name. We're going to show content of the type animals, sorted by title. We're going to create a page at the animals URL that we've sort of been prepping everything for. It's going to be in table format. We're going to actually remember to create a menu link this time, not like my run-throughs. And we're going to include an RSS feed, which is your lowest common denominator form of open data. It gives you at least something that feeds out. And we're going to put that in the animals folder, and we're just going to call it rss.xml. Continue and edit. All right. So here we have a view, and you can see there's some extra content added by my colleague at the side of the room. It's not very exciting right now because all it's got is the title. So we're going to change some things. We're going to limit this to animals, and we're going to pick and choose which fields we want. So we want the class, we want the collective noun, we don't want the fun fact or the location. We want the name of the female, the name of the male, the name of the young, whether or not it's on campus, and the photo. And we're going to configure those now. Most of them we're just going to take the defaults. So class is a class. We want to be just plain text because of that listing page we haven't created for those. Collective nouns we're just going to take default. Names for female we're just going to take default. Names for male we're going to take default. Names for young we're going to take default. On campus we're going to take default. Photo, we're going to force it to be that thumbnail size again, and we're going to link it to the content this time so that if they click on the image, they go to the actual piece of content. And now you can see our listing page is much more exciting. Now, one of the things that Drupal does by default is sort in descending alphabetical order, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we're going to change that to ascending. We also, because these got added in alphabetical order, the order of the columns doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to bring the photo up here, and we're going to do the order of young, male, female, collective, on campus. And we're going to, that should be it. Yeah, there we go. Now we're going to add the ability to filter this content so people can search through it. So we're going to add some filters. We're not going to add all the filters, again, in the interest of time. But what we're going to do is add a filter for the name of the young. And we're also going to search for the on-campus field. So we're going to expose the filter to let people change it. We're going to take out the machine name, which doesn't make a lot of sense to have in there. We're going to make it contains so that they can just type part of a name. They don't have to get it all right. And we're going to, on campus, we're going to expose it. Going to take the machine name out. And that should do it. And now we have filters on top. One more thing we're going to do in here in the advanced settings is we're going to go into the query settings and force it to be distinct so that if somebody searches for a term that the search would match multiple items but with the same item. For example, if I search for kit and I find kit and kitten, it's only going to display the row once instead of once for kit, once for kitten. The other thing we're going to do while we're here is play around with the table a bit. So we're going to take the default classes off of it because we don't need them for what we're doing. I'm going to take this photo and I'm going to put it in the same column as the title and just separate it with a break tag. So now we have that. And we're just going to go into the RSS feed and we're going to change it from using the default settings to displaying full content. Alright, and then we're going to save this. So if I've done this properly, and third time is the charm, when we go to the home page there should be a link for animals, and there is. So this is that listing page we created. There it is on the page. If I type in kit and hit apply, it shows the cat. Of course, it's very hard to find pictures of cat on the internet, so there's no photo available for the cat. And this does have an RSS feed associated with it. If we'd had more time, I'd have displayed that in a block over here. I'm just going to click through the RSS feed and you can see that there's the cat because it's a filtered page. If I take the filter off and click on the RSS feed, I actually get everything. Now we could we could spend a lot of time cleaning this up, so it's a lot more. We do something about the fact that the location doesn't show up, things like that, but that's not worth our time right now. So we've actually done the meat of it. We have a content type, we have a listing page. Now we're ready to put it on our real site because you certainly never develop on your live site. So we're going to go into our structure and features. Features is a Drupal thing that lets us export what we've worked on in the GUI to code. So that you can just put it on another site and turn it on if what you've done is okay. Or you can hand it off to a themer or a developer if you need some functionality added or to make it look prettier. So we're going to give this a name of, surprisingly enough, animals. We are going to change the machine name even though we're short on time because it's very hard to change a features machine name after the fact. Description is content type and information about animals. We're going to go ahead and put it in the URL content types package so that it bundles with all the other content types we have. And we're going to be really generous about the work and call it version 1. But we are going to call it alpha. And now we're just going to search for animals here, and we're going to add all the things we configured about animals. This is why consistent naming is great. It lets you use the search. If we name them all different things, this search would be more awkward. So we're going to bring in the node. We're going to bring in the content types. You see it starts auto-detecting some things. We never featureize comments. We don't need to featureize the menu links because that comes elsewhere. We featureize every single one of these permissions. We don't featureize the schema org mappings unless we've actually configured them, which we didn't. We featureize all of these variables. And we make absolutely sure we get that view, which is our listing page. And then we would just download the feature. And now normally at this point I'd hit save, I'd move it to the server, I'd extract it. I'm going to hit cancel and just open this oven, which I've prepared the content earlier. So here we have our live site. You notice there's no animals menu item. If I go to add content, animals is missing. So I'm just going to go into, I've already put the feature in place here. This is one that I prepared earlier, so it's probably slightly different, but got content type. There's our animals content type. It conflicts with something that's not turned on, so that doesn't matter. We hit save. I'll close this other window. And then when it's done, through the magic of computers, we will have everything we need except the content. Normally you don't create all the content when you're testing because it's really awkward to try and move it over after the fact. And this is making me vamp far longer than I wanted to. Does anybody have any jokes? So because this was a feature, it's now doing all the stuff that we did manually, automatically, so it's creating all the database tables. It's making all the settings that we needed. Please don't let this clear screen.
Can you export all that data if you want to? One site, somebody had.
There are certain things that let you export data. It's safest if you're going from bare site to bare site. It can be somewhat dangerous if you're going from bare site to populated site because of all the automated, the term IDs, the primary keys in the database the numbers aren't the same, so it may get confused. There we go. Now if we go into content type, see it's on. If we go to our home page, there's our animals. If we go to add content, there's our animals. And we can create content, which I won't bother you, and then we'd have our listing page. The listing page is not very exciting right now because we haven't entered any content. This is also something you can do in the view settings if we'd had more time, is put up a message when there is no content that matches what they've searched for. So that is that. So we're done. Now, as I've sort of said before, there's still some fires to put out. Like, we want that message that says there is no content here. If they search for quote, then it's got to say something and not just give them a blank screen. But that's the gist of it. So if you want to try this for yourself, you need a Drupal site where you have system administrator access. This is higher access than we give out on pilot sites, on production sites, on training sites. So we can get you a WCMS development site. Just send in a request at rt@waterloo.ca, or you can set up a development environment of your own, however you like, maybe on your own machine. If you want to go further, we have Friday morning sessions in EC2, which is the BlackBerry buildings, our new home, where we talk about Drupal and watch some Drupal training videos quite often. We in the WCMS have a bunch of Drupal books. We have access to Drupalize Me training videos. The lynda.com videos, which are available to all faculty, staff, and grad students, have some Drupal stuff. If you search for Drupal on the web, you will get millions of results for varying versions of Drupal. There's Drupal cons, which are local get-togethers. There's Drupal camps, which are big semi-annual conferences. Drupal cons and Drupal camps have a big tendency to put their videos online after they've hosted, so they're another great video source. So that's it. Any questions? How'd I do? Holy crap, we went through that fast. Questions? Yeah.
How different is that environment you were just working with from a stock Drupal?
That's a good question. So we've turned on some things. Like that is stock WCMS as opposed to stock Drupal. So I didn't add anything that isn't already in our profile. But things like the views, that's not part of stock Drupal. But pretty much everybody who runs Drupal ends up turning on views because it's so useful. I think the link field isn't there by default. There's a few other things that aren't there in an absolute bare bones Drupal, but most of the ones that I use today would be something that pretty much every Drupal developer ends up turning on. Anything else? All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
That was very interesting.
Is there a way of seeing what other contents type, contents thing? Can you see what other people have done? Is there a good catalog of what people have already done before you go off and build your own?
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
So, sort of. Something you can do is go to git.urlu.ca/public, I believe, which lets you show what people have made public. We have a group here for the WCMS. We make all of our projects public, so you can see what our project list is, see the things we've done. If you're looking to add functionality, there's almost always a module for that. Like if you want a field that specifically, I'm just trying to think, brings in an animated GIF, you could do that.
So let's say I was working in the taxidermy department, and I wanted
Yes.
a class of animals.
Yeah. Right. So this is why we try and rename things to get those machine names as distinct as we can. So I used, I admit I used just UW_animals or UWCT animals, depending on where I was. Generally, it's a good idea if you're not part of the central system to maybe add your department into that list. So UW_zoo_animals or something like that if you're the zoology department.
But would I come here to look and see if anybody's created an animals content type?
Yeah, it should be here if it's there. Right now we have very few content types that were created outside of the WCMS team, so pretty much everything should be in here. So anything that's UWCT is a content type. We are pretty good at keeping that consistent.
You just sort of partly answered my question, which was you just said there's very few content types that have been created outside of your outside of the WCMS team, right?
Yeah.
What are some examples?
It's a good question. I say there's very few because I can't think of examples.
Okay, zero.
Most of what was created outside is functionality rather than content types.
Okay.
I can't think offhand of anybody who actually did create a content type. I guess outside, this is really stretching the definition of outside, I guess, but MSC, when Chris Carrigan worked for them,
Yeah.
he created some content type specifically for the university homepage.
Okay. Which makes sense because if you're creating functionality, it's probably going to be applicable. I mean, even in the example you created right now, if there was a big demand for that, it's probably going to be a slightly more vanilla version of it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
probably
true
going to be appealing across campus, right?
And this is great if you've got something that really is specific to you. Like we've done similar things for example, the Mennonite archives. They have a Mennonite archives content type, which collects the fields they expect. It would be just a blob of useless data if they put it in the website content type. So, but we can't create custom content types for everybody. So that would be really handy if you have this sort of need, if you can create it yourself.
And you guys support that?
Support as in allow? Yes.
Allow.
We allow that. We provide very limited support. We can sort of get you nudged in the right direction. We insist on a review before we actually make your code live, just to make sure you're not doing anything crazy, just to make sure that you haven't renamed one of our core items, that you're that sort of thing. All right.